Today we look at two last extensions on the 8860 car chassis, the official motorization using 4.5 volt parts, and the official alt model, a dragster. We start with the former, which powers both the steering and the drivetrain. The somewhat difficult to follow instructions consist only of photos and parts callouts. Half of the steps even have negative callouts showing parts to remove. We covered some 4.5 volt basics in previous videos, but the motorization requires an element many may not have seen, a tiny integrated gearbox with the same cross-section and texture as the old motors. This device features a very hefty gear reduction, though we could not determine the exact specification. For reference, the 9-volt motor used for this demo has a no-load speed of over 4,000 RPM, while the final output probably has something like 100 RPM. The steering gear includes a rubber band since the very basic on-off electronics have no way to stop the motor when the rack reaches the end of its travel. While we previously had difficulty controlling this kind of system, the setup proved fairly responsive and not very difficult to center. I'd probably even call this the better side of the motorization, but it might not have mattered if it worked less well. 8860 uses the tiny gearbox to help move the vehicle. On top of that, the set adds another two 1-to-3 reduction stages for a net ratio of maybe 1 to 1,000 in first gear. Considering that the 4.5 volt motors probably run at a couple thousand RPM, well, you can do the math. Here we noticed a strange thing in the photos. The springs shown don't look like the springs in the set. In fact, they look like loose springs placed over cross axles, perhaps an early prototype. We only had one proper battery box, so we decided to use it for steering since it had a proper switch. We directly wired up some loose battery holders for running and simply let it go. The drive doesn't need finer control because, as you may have guessed, the chassis moves insanely slowly. The drivetrain struggles to move the massive model even with all the aforementioned reduction. Yes, you can still shift the gears. First gear is very slow, second gear is very slow, and third gear is slightly less slow, but stressing the drivetrain enough to make gears skip. Pretty much unusable, like the first gear when pushing. Overall, this setup feels pretty impractical from a driving perspective, perhaps fitting for the seemingly low-effort instructions. So what about the alt model? Well, even before that, the steps contain lots of parts and lots of weirdness, and they feel just as compressed and just as inconsistent as those for the main model. Even within one subassembly, the instructions place the same layers of plates at different rates. At least one other step has a rotated view that looks like its own subassembly, and several steps require pushing axles through several parts while installing bushings in between. For all that effort, the alt model is very much a B model. A dragster doesn't fundamentally differ that much from a car chassis, and the pathetic feature set falls far short. The model drives, steers, and rotates the engine, which doesn't even spin that freely. See the fan. The length of the vehicle makes it very flimsy and absolutely destroys the turn radius. Even the cosmetics feel bad. The seat looks more like a lawn chair, and the model looks more like a lawn mower. So yeah, neither of these extensions are very good, but perhaps anything would fall short of such an amazing A model. That being said, if the designers couldn't match the quality, I'd rather have seen something mediocre but other than another wheeled vehicle. On that note, this is the end of the video. Please subscribe if you like what we do, and have a nice day.